Today let's talk about charity and stroll over to the right-leaning side of the internet. We're reading an article from Faithwire today where a Christian argues that the charitable instinct itself is endangered by the likes of Bernie Sanders. He opens on billionaires.
Bill Gates is the second richest man in the entire world. While the Microsoft founder doesn't mind paying more than anybody in taxes, the idea of a massive wealth tax isn't going over too well.
Okay, well, one, he just said that he'd be willing to pay twice as much in taxes, and two, a wealth tax actually goes over pretty well with everyone except Republican males with a degree.
Good luck, everybody else!
CBS News asked Sanders if his wealth tax would diminish charitable spending, to which the senator replied, "When you raise wages to a living wage, when you end homelessness in America, when you end hunger, poor people are not gonna need charity, they're gonna have dignity."
So to make it shorter, if fewer people had the problems that some charities address, then fewer people would, need charities. But instead of a one-size-fits-all wage increase across all states, I'd suggest, and let me use my notes, that we develop a national comprehensive formula that better sets wages commensurate to the cost of living by specified areas within the states applicable to businesses of certain sizes and profitability, while also legislating against the manufactured inflation of subsequent retaliatory price hikes that seek to regain the previous profit margin, which would render said wage increases meaningless.
This sentiment reveals where Sanders and many on the far left end of the political spectrum believe human individuals obtain their dignity. It also shows they don't understand charity either.
We're gonna find out what this guy considers dignity very soon, but first he needs to pearl clutch about the true meaning of charity.
I shudder to think of a world where people feel they no longer need to be charitable to others because the government is supplying them with a few extra dollars.
Actually, it adds a third or doubles the hourly rate for most states, and a few extra dollars means a lot at that level. There's plenty of pet causes and charities that people can still give to. This is like saying,
if there were no starving homeless people, I wouldn't be able to volunteer at a soup kitchen. Won't someone please think of the volunteers?
To say that one obtains dignity from a living wage is to say that money is the source of our ultimate worth as human beings.
money is a tool for accessing many of the things that usually accompany much of our dignity. Namely, like being able to provide the basics like food, clothing, and shelter for ourselves and our families without, and this is the important part, running ourselves ragged to do it. Or subsisting on only the cheapest, crappiest forms of those things.
To assume raising one's hourly earning from $10 to $15 an hour will make them suddenly feel dignified and no longer in need of any charity whatsoever is preposterous, because it is self-evident that one does not come from the other.
Well, it's not that 15 is some magic number towards self-fulfillment. In some places it's too high, in some places it's too low. It's that whatever that number is, it should allow anyone working full-time to participate in the economy and cycle money around. And $7.25 is not enough to do that. Over half of minimum wage workers are over 25. These aren't just wages for transient teenagers, and even then, there are teens with family responsibilities and sick relatives that had to settle for a GED, get right into work, and can't even dream of college.
Well, not everyone needs to go to college.
True, but they can't start a family or save for their futures on minimum wage.
They could start a business.
Assuming they could save enough to launch it. Not everyone is cut out for managing a business. That's not a scalable solution. At some point, people will just have to work for each other. And when that happens, we'd hope they make enough money to live.
Instead of college, perhaps they could opt for a trade school.
Trade jobs are valuable, but again, that's not a scalable solution. How many HVAC, electricians, plumbers, and welders do we need in a 20-mile radius? That's just going to drive more people out of their small towns to find work.
But minimum wage is supposed to be shitty. The work is low skill for transient, easily replaceable labor.
Personally, I've never been all that convinced that low skill and high turnover even is an argument for low wages. Let's say that in order for your business to run, all you needed was one employee somewhere to push one button once a day. It takes no skill to do it. But if that button getting pushed is what keeps you making $60K to $16 million in take-home pay each year, then the position being filled is worth more than the person filling it, and you're paying for the value of the position, not the skill it takes or the easily replaceable employee that fills it.
Money cannot purchase happiness, but Bernie Sanders wants you to believe that it can. That $5 more per hour can create self-worth you never knew you had. We get our worth from the Creator, who says I'm made in the image of God.
You know, if someone had told me when I woke up today that I would be reading someone use the Son of God to try to justify shitty wages, I would have been like, what right-wing side am I going to today? Because only them mother would try to do this.
This likeness to God, distinct from other created beings that roam the earth, is what gives us dignity. Without God's hand in our creation, we are no more dignified than the rocks, trees, dust, and dirt that fill the earth.
Oh, that spiritual dignity really filled me up last night, and my kids. And it kept the lights on. As much as I love good behavior prizes you can really only collect on after you're dead, it would seem to be cold comfort to the families that have to choose between buying winter jackets for their kids or fixing the car that takes them to work. And spoiler, the car wins. How much money you make can relate to dignity in our country. If you're working full-time but barely making enough to continue doing your job once you factor in food, where you sleep at night, transportation to and from work, clothes for work, potential insurances not covered or poorly covered by work, potential debts, and you can only buy necessary things in the variation you can afford, often subpar, again while working full-time, you can have some self-respect for pulling it all off, but I would argue it's not a dignified situation to be in. Working like a dog with bare survival to show for it, and not making enough to save for an education to increase your value and opportunities, or start a family, or to save meaningfully for retirement. That doesn't sound like a very dignified experience to me, or like someone who's supposed to be living in the greatest country in the world, right? So why are so many people in that bind, and good people too? Then it's just more of a sermon from that point to probably get it over a certain word count. I believe that the charitable instinct will always exist in some form, it just changes over time. What if charity meant giving someone a free or discounted ice cream cone to be nice, rather than the basic necessities our species needs to live? Having food needs taken care of by farmers, fishers, and hunters freed up overwhelming masses of our species to pursue other limits of our potential. We'll always need food and water, so we'll always need farmer-gatherers, but we're no longer a species of hunter-farmer-gatherers anymore. With the time not spent scrounging up food and water, we've developed complex mathematics, space travel, technologies that better preserve food, the tools to construct images of our imaginations, and so much more. Humans and capital have benefited from societies where humans don't have to be fully self-sufficient. Back to the billions thing. For perspective, if you wanted to count to 1,000,000, it would take you about 12 days. Call Guinness and get it done. If you wanted to count to 1,000,000,000, it would take you about 32 years. More than a third of the average human lifespan. Just so we know, we're talking about very different numbers here. The real problem with wealth, like Gates and Bezos, is that the money effectively vanishes from our economy because, try as he might, it's really hard to put $100 billion to work domestically as a private citizen. The very safeguards that prevent them from using their fortunes to unilaterally damage other businesses or exploit civilians ensure that they cannot make a truly systemic change. They lack the authority. Any billions that he has in disposable income is effectively a trivia factoid. It's a promise both never made and never delivered. It's ghost money. We're in a world where you need money to, do stuff, and most people will need money at some point to procure something they need to survive, and you can't just print more money. But most of the available money in the country is stuck in very small places, making the country very rich, but rather cash poor at the same time, especially with investments and excessive debts pulling money back up to the top faster than it can come down. What do you do in a situation like that? Basically, cats like climbing trees. Sometimes they get stuck. Instead of letting them pile up there, help them down to ensure a steady cycle of cat tree migration.
The claim that Gates could solve these issues and remain a multi-billionaire seems dubious at best, considering the federal government already collects over $4 trillion in taxes annually, yet they haven't solved homelessness.
Yeah, in 2015, the federal government spent only $4.5 billion, a relatively tiny amount for government spending, on addressing homelessness with the usual band-aid methods. It was still somewhat effective. Yes, spending less money on less direct methods hasn't eliminated homelessness. Who knew? There will always be homeless people in any large country, but there are theorized initiatives that can bring them back into our economy, and more importantly, things that can prevent them from falling out of it. There's making it easier to climb up, and there's making it harder to fall through the cracks. If you're a person who believes in merit, you're probably not going to support the former too much. But if you're someone who believes in personal responsibility, you don't have to be against the latter. There's still a fail condition. It's possible to lose. But charity and altruism are far too complex of topics to get into today. People are allowed to have different perspectives on what they want out of society and the risks that they're willing to take in it. So feel free to share your take on what you think of these issues in the comments. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.